Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, Assemblyman Bob Oaks. Bob Oaks represents the 130th Assembly District, which includes the counties of Wayne, Cayuga, Oswego. We thank you folks all throughout the region for joining us. And Bob Oaks, happy 2018.
Good morning, Mike. Good to see you.
Our first chance to sit down and chat this legislative session at the state capitol, and you've been kind of busy.
Well, we have. This is when the governor gets his budget out, talks about what his focus is for the state, and now the opportunity for the legislature to gather information and respond to the governor's budget proposal.
It is a long process. It really is. So it's a good thing that it starts right at the beginning of this legislative session. We heard in the first week of this session from the governor in a State of the State message. He followed it right up with his budget proposal, which he presented to the legislature. And as you said, that discussion has really already kind of started, maybe informally, but there's also legislative budget hearings that are now being held practically every day of the week here in Albany. So you've been busy as the ranking member on the Assembly's Ways and Means Committee, which is knee-deep in these budget talks. Let's start off by hearing a little bit from the governor and what he had to say, right, and a little bit of your reaction to that. That'll get us kicked off here on our discussion of what some of the big issues are facing Albany in this 2018 legislative session. And we'll be back to talk more about it all with Bob Oaks.
Washington's tax plan now uses New York and California as piggy banks to finance tax cuts for Republican states. New York will pay an additional $14 billion on top of the $48 billion that we currently pay. Remember the old adage, robbing Peter to pay Paul? Well, they changed it. They're now robbing the blue states to pay for the red states. It is crass, it is ugly, it is divisive, it is partisan legislating, it is an economic civil war. And make no mistake, they are aiming to hurt us. This could cause people to leave the state of New York.
Well, the governor today started out and said we're having a very challenging budget year, and he's right on that. But then he proceeded to start in blaming the federal government and actually saying that every New Yorker is going to be hurt by the federal tax reform. In reality, a lot of the people that I represent in my district are going to benefit individually by this new tax proposal. But be that as it may, the impact on New York, there are real impacts, and we have to figure that out. But it seems like the governor talked all about raising revenues, not cutting taxes, not providing mandate relief, not looking for ways to not incur more debt. The governor turned to the typical ways of government when it says, let's just tax people more or find more dollars under this rock for one-time only spending.
That's really interesting, because this governor has been shouting to anyone who will listen since the federal tax bill went through the process that it was going to practically, it sounded like it was going to wreck New York State. You're saying a lot of the people you represent are going to do okay?
Right, absolutely. And when he said every New Yorker will be hurt by this, that's just not right. The state government and certain New Yorkers are going to be paying more dollars because we're a high-tax state and people have been able to write off those taxes. Most of the people that I represent, all the taxes they pay, they're still going to be able to write off, or they're going to be able to benefit because of the lower tax brackets. But you know, what we're in the midst of here now is really looking at how does New York State respond to that federal change. And very honestly, New York State gets some windfall monies, some of the extra dollars that would be paid that could hurt some of the taxpayers. We need to make some of those changes in New York State law because actually it's tied to the federal law. So federal changes make changes in the state. Some of that will bring additional dollars into the state coffers. So there's balances here that need to be made. There's things that need to be done to straighten and figure this all out. That's part of the process. We're in the midst of it. In fact, you mentioned budget hearings. This Thursday, we'll be talking about taxes at the budget hearing. Usually that's kind of a pretty quick day and whatever. I think it could be a longer day as we delve into more what is the implication, what are the implications of the federal tax plan on New York State, and how do we respond?
So as you look at this balancing then of the books to compensate for what Washington has done, you made a point in your remarks on tape there that the governor's been talking more about how to raise more money. Does that mean how to collect more taxes?
It seems the typical answer sometimes when there's a hole, it's not trying to cut some things over here that may be in good times or times you want to try something new, you spend some additional dollars. He's not looking at those options as much as he's looking at where do we find more money, how can we bring more in to fill the holes. I just think it's a difference of how you approach government in tough times. I think you look to cut back to spend your money more wisely and more frugally.
You've proposed a bill this year in Albany having to do with spending and it having some transparency in terms of the state's economic development programs. I think most of the people watching this program realize there's a big trial taking place in New York City right now involving some of the governor's administration and corruption charges against them involved in the spending around some of those economic development programs. What exactly would your bill do?
Well, thank you for asking about that, Mike. What the problems have been is we have pots of money in New York State that have been passed in the state budget that don't have a direct determination of where that money is going. So it's a pot of money that can be utilized by the governor or the legislature for projects that might come up during the year. Those dollars are significant. And what we actually in this corruption trial, we saw people closest aides to the governor benefiting themselves from directing some of those dollars to projects that developers had, individuals had, and where the individual himself, Mr. Percoco, actually benefited from dollars that came to him. What we also have seen is direct lines for those dollars that are going out to people who are making campaign contributions to the chief executive of the state. And so those are very troubling. And so what my bill would do is, one, if there's individual pots of money that are out there for economic development, for other projects that may be important for this state, that there would be greater oversight, not some lackey or top aide of the governor making a decision, you're going to get this money, you're going to get this money. The comptroller who's independently elected, the attorney general who's independently elected, and the budget director of the state who's appointed by the governor would form a board that would look at and make sure there's no conflicts of interest, that this is a legitimate issue, it follows through, and then the money can go out, not something that's happened before where we're not knowing how that decision's being made. And then secondly, any of the people on the boards that would make recommendations of where money goes, or people who serve on the regional economic development committees, people who are making recommendations, let's spend millions in this project, let's try to help the capital region, let's try to help Rochester, Syracuse, or the Finger Lakes, and whatever.
Or the Buffalo Billions.
Or any of those.
Yeah.
That there would be, they can't make campaign contributions. Those people can't be the type of people who are out there benefiting the governor by also making, or other electeds, for making those decisions. I just think it starts to finally say, no, we aren't going to do it the way that people have always. The governor started out, when he started in his term, we're going to have the most transparent government in the world. People are going to be able to open the doors and see what's happening. And more than ever, we have things done behind closed doors, not sure who's making the decisions. And so that bill hopefully would go a long way toward having openness, transparency in government, and not having the troublesome situations where we have with aides of the governor, people trying to benefit themselves. We have fraud, corruption charges and trial going on as we speak.
Yeah, I mean, the corruption trial's happening. We're paying attention to that, and maybe Albany will react somehow, although based on recent history, I'm sometimes not so sure. But there's been a lot of strange stuff going on We've got those roadway signs on the thruway and other interstate highways traveling through New York that apparently are costing the state money, but the governor said he had to have these signs up touting some of the state's economic development and tourism activities. There's been a lot of criticism of the spending of these economic development programs, how effective they are. A lot of money's being spent, not a lot of jobs coming into the state or such.
All of those things.
It was like, what's happening with this right now? And it doesn't seem to be a very effective way. I mean, I sit in my living room in the Capital District area, and I see all kinds of TV commercials about how I should bring my business, relocate my business to New York State. That just doesn't even make sense to me.
Well, if you think about it, you know, the policies of the governor have sometimes gone backseat to the immediacy of the moment. You know, I think there ought to be debates about policy and where we go, and the best policies are formed when you have an open discussion and have input from the minority and the majority and the executive. This governor wants to make the decisions, again, over here with a few people, and he pushes forward like the signs. Do you get the input from the federal government first? No. Go ahead, make them, buy them, put them up. Now have the challenge. Oops, they don't fit. We're going to keep them up. No, we're working on it. Now we get money withheld from the feds. Okay, now we're giving up. Who is the loser in all of this? It's the taxpayers of New York State because of the attitude and I think the ineffectiveness of the executive of the policy that he put into place.
It sure looks that way. I don't know any other way to paint that thing. We see all the time policies being initiated into the budget discussions. I don't think there's been a recent budget negotiation where that hasn't happened. You've talked in past years about wanting to change that and just have it be a budget negotiation, be a numbers affair, right? Not, working in as leverage with crowbars and shoehorns and such. Some of these difficult budget issues or non-budget issues that come up here in Albany.
Well, for instance, last year we had a late budget that carried on for a number of days. As you remember, the legislature was in Albany for literally almost 2 consecutive weeks without going home, trying to deal with finalizing the budget. But the issue wasn't the numbers as much as it was policy issues, things that are best, I think, if you're going to change some major policy initiative. Last year it was raise the age and trying to impact how we treat 16 and 17-year-olds within the criminal justice system. This year, bail reform. The governor wants to do away with cash bail in most instances and create a whole different system. Should that be decided behind closed doors as a part of the budget situation, or should it be decided sometimes after we figure with the costs and all the facts and figures for the coming year, and then deal with a significant policy issue like that? And so what my bill would do, another proposal that we've been working on, is saying, okay, if you're going to have initiatives in the budget, you need to have appropriations spelled out in the budget of how they're going to be spent. Nobody has any idea how that money is going to be spent. The policy hasn't been developed yet, and so we would try to separate those things more as we do the budget.
And have an open public debate on the floor of the
Absolutely.
Assembly and in the Senate. This is the stuff that I think the people watching expect to be happening.
Absolutely.
We're out of time. Bob Oaks, as always, thanks for joining us today. We'll catch up with you as the budget hearings continue at the state capitol. We hope you folks will join us for our next Assembly Calendar.